and welcome back to Cocktails and Commodities. You are here in the OnAir IMARC booth at IMARC. Do you know what? It has been a long 3 days. Joining me today is Greg Hall from Alligator Energy. Greg, how are you?
I'm very good, thanks, Shay. Nice to talk to you.
It's lovely to talk to you. Now, you are operating in one of my favourite metals at the moment, and that's uranium. Now, I know as a commodities podcast, we're not meant to have favourites, but I'm very excited about the future for uranium, especially in Australia. Now, tell me, what you just told me off camera then, your company's just managed to raise $30 million in what is essentially a depressed market for small cap stocks. What is so exciting about your projects that you're able to do that?
Well, it's not just our projects, but the uranium business and the nuclear power business at the moment has got a resurgence on. Logically, it's driven by the support to climate change and greenhouse emissions, trying to get sort of base load support, power generation to back up renewables. Europe in particular has swung that way. There's at least 14, 15 countries which are now ramping up their new nuclear programs as well as their existing. The US, for the very first time ever, has a Democrat presidency and administration which fully supports nuclear. That's never occurred before. So the US is bipartisan. And we know that both China and the Middle East has been constructing multiple nuclear power plants for a long time. So you're getting that support, underpinning support of the demand for uranium, enrichment, nuclear fuel services, etc. Then the other thing that's occurred, of course, is the geopolitical changes. Russia has been a big supplier of enriched uranium product for nuclear power for a long time. And that's because when they changed, the wall came down, all sorts of things happened in the 90s, there's a lot of excess military weapon stocks around, and that can be down-blended or diluted down for power station grade. So the US and many Western countries supported them doing that. At moment, it gave them US dollars. It took some excess material, weapons material off the market. So it's called megatons to megawatts. It was taking bombs and making electricity from it. That's an extremely important business because it ran right from the early 90s right through until just recently, or 2012, it formally stopped, but then the Russians kept using their facilities to create from Western uranium enriched material, which they would then sell to Europe and the US. So much so that 40% of Europe's enriched product that was in nuclear power plants in Europe and 30% of the US came from Russia. Now, with the advent of the Ukraine war, that has meant that there's a reduction and a ramping down of the buying of Russian material. So there's some long-term contracts that have to wipe out, or wash out, say. But that is changing. So what that's done is it's now put the emphasis back on countries which are producing uranium, in particular in Western countries such as Australia, the United States, Canada, countries in Africa, and that's where you're seeing the growth of new uranium ventures. So a lot of old ones that have been on care and maintenance are coming back online, and new ones like ours are starting up and getting into the stage of ready for production. So that's the summary of why the uranium is moving well at the moment.
Look, uranium, long-time uranium investors have had a couple of false starts, but they're, the four most expensive words in history are it's different this time, but there does, as you've just so rightly pointed out, there is an absolute global change in sentiment towards uranium and its place in nuclear energy. Tell me, without getting too political about this, how do we start to change that sentiment within Australia? Because politically it's unpopular, but yet our explorers and our uranium producers are doing quite well.
Well, look, it'll take a bit of time. So Australia is not a country that's well suited to the traditional large-scale nuclear plants. So you might have a nuclear plant that's 1.6 gigawatt, so 1,600 megawatt. That's a very, very big plant. Typically, our power stations in Australia, with a diverse grid, 250 up to 500 megawatt is a nice size. So the latest technological innovations in nuclear are the small modular reactors. So these are ones ranging from anywhere from 50 to 250 or 300. So they are now being constructed. The first commercial ones of those are being constructed. So they'll be in operation both in the States, in Canada, and in Europe over the next 5 to 7 years. That's when I think Australian governments, either side of Australian governments, will start to think, okay, these are operating now. They fit our grid. They can directly replace coal boilers if you want, and operate existing in our grid. So I think that's when there'll be almost an automatic view of these to say, is this suitable? There is still a lot of, let's call it old 1970s thinking about anti-nuclear that's prevalent in our country. But it's changing. It's changing in the younger generation. It's now curious, and the younger generation says we want renewables, we want clean power, we don't want to destroy the planet. What can we do? And small modular and the latest fail-safe mechanisms within nuclear, the more modern reactors, are fantastic.
Greg, I am devastated that we're about to run out of time because I think we could continue this conversation for a lot longer. But before you go, this podcast is called Cocktails and Commodities. We've talked about the commodity. Now time to talk about the cocktail. Tell me, if I happen to bump into you at a bar later tonight, which is entirely possible at a mining conference, what cocktail would I be buying you?
Caipirinha.
Say that again?
Caipirinha.
Ooh, what's that one?
It uses the Brazilian cachaça with lime and icing sugar, and that's it.
That
Ice.
sounds amazing.
Yeah, so cachaça is made from sugar cane. So it's related to white rum, if you like.
Okay, so that also tells me, we're divulging from where we should be going, that that's probably a specialised drink and not every bartender is capable of making it.
No, that's common. Caipirinhas are well known now.
It is?
So,
Oh,
yeah,
okay,
it's much
cool.
more common. So
Do you know what?
If we bump in, I'll get you one.
I would love that. Greg from Alligator Resources, thank you so much for being on here in my little pod here at IMARC. This has been fantastic, and I hope we get to continue our uranium conversation another day.
Yeah, thank you very much, Shay. That's great.